So I wanted to do something a little bit different in this video. I wanted to find three real life war stories which put the Rambo movies to shame. And this was actually more difficult than you think, given that I've covered quite a lot of people already and I didn't want to recover people. I mean, I've done Alvin York, I've done Audie Murphy, I've done Adrian Carton de Viet. Of course their stories are all better than Rambo's, but I figured there'd be a few more out there. I've even, to keep this video on theme, got kidding myself out of the M60, which you saw me unlogging there, because you know Rambo loved to stand with his light machine guns out in the open, spraying people down, never taking a bullet. Unfortunately, some of the people in these stories did take a bullet, and a grenade, and pretty much everything else that would blow you to pieces normally, unless you were a war hero, and these guys were war heroes. The first story, though, of Mad Jack Churchill, and they called him Mad Jack because he didn't take, well, just a knife to a gunfight. And by a gunfight, I mean World War II. But he did instead take a bow and arrow, a Robin Hood, and a claymore. And I don't mean an explosive kind of claymore, the sword kind of claymore. He actually went and fought World War II with a bow and arrow, and a sword, and a couple of grenades in his commando unit. He very famously said, just before he went and captured 42 Germans on his own with just his sword, that any officer who goes into action without his sword is improperly dressed. And apparently the trick to capturing Germans, if you want to create like a German farm in Minecraft or something, is to say loudly and clearly to the German what you want him to do, and if you're senior to him, he will shout "Jawohl" and get on with it enthusiastically and efficiently. So I might go and try that next time I go and visit Germany. Now, unfortunately, when Mad Jack wasn't doing things like competing in the World Archery Championships and stuff like that, him and his commando unit got hit directly by a mortar strike by the Germans in another kind of raid, and everybody died and he was the only survivor there. As the Germans advanced through the smoke of the mortar strikes, Mad Jack was sat there in the crater playing "Will Ye No Come Back Again" on his bagpipes, which he also carried into battle because of course he wasn't even Scottish. So I don't know why he had bagpipes, but he had bagpipes, and and he got taken prisoner. Now, as he was Mad Jack, and he liked the finer things in life, he'd actually been a male model as well when he was younger. He didn't like the prisoner of war camp the Germans put him in, so instead of tunnelling out, one day when the guards had opened the gate for some other prisoners, he just walked out with a rusty can of pickled onions, travelled 150 miles and then got picked up by the Americans. That is how you escape from a prisoner of war camp. Mad Jack Churchill 1, Rambo 0. On to war story number 2. Now, as you know, Rambo never gets hit by bullets because he only fights stormtroopers. Unfortunately, in real life, people do get shot and blown up and such. And that leads us on to the story of Michael J. Fitzmaurice. Now, Fitzmaurice took one for the lads, shall we say. He was in South Vietnam, and one of the tactics that the North Vietnamese used to use was they used to suicide bomb the Americans. So they'd have these guys called, I think, sappers, who used to have 3 grenades. They'd used to throw 2 at the Americans and then run with the third one, pull the pin, and sort of blow themselves up when they got to the Americans. Unfortunately, one of the sappers didn't get the memo, so he threw all 3 of his grenades. 2 of them landed in the bunker, and Fitzmaurice managed to throw them back out of the bunker. Unfortunately, the third one also landed in there. So to save the other guys, his comrades who were in there, Fitzmaurice dropped his flak jacket on top of the grenade, jumped on top of it himself as well, and got himself blown up. As you can imagine, unless you're apparently Captain America, a flak jacket does not absorb all the blast of a grenade, and Fitzmaurice took quite a large proportion of that. He got absolutely peppered with shrapnel which escaped from around the side of the flak jacket. He was deafened because, of course, grenade going off is pretty loud and it ruptured his eardrums, and the flash from it actually partially blinded him. Most soldiers would have probably wanted to seek some kind of medical attention at this point, as it's probably quite difficult to fight a war when you can't see the enemy and you can't hear what's going on either. But Fitzmaurice was having none of this. He jumped out of his bunker with a machine gun and started spraying down the rest of the sappers who were still attacking the Americans. Unfortunately, another grenade landed on him and blew up his gun. Didn't hurt him whatsoever, although he was pretty severely wounded at this point from the shrapnel from the first grenade. So he decided to beat that guy to death with his bare hands, even though he couldn't see him, so he just sort of grabbed onto the nearest Vietnamese guy he could, and I think strangled him to death. He then got that guy's gun, refused any more medical attention, took orders from his friends, who were telling him which direction to shoot in, and ploughed down a few more at the Vietnamese, before finally being the last guy into the medical helicopter. I think Rambo probably loses this one as well. Which leads us to our third war story. A lot of you have asked me in private messages to do this war story, so I presume a lot have heard this story before. But it is, of course, on the White Death, the Finnish elite marksman, Simo Häyhä. Now, Simo Häyhä was a 5-foot Finnish guy who did not take very kindly to the Russians invading Finland in 1939. So Simo dressed himself in head to toe in full white warm clothing camo, took himself a couple of cans of food, just enough for the day, slung his Mosin Nagant M28 rifle over his shoulder, and headed out to go and fight some Russians in 6 foot of snow and minus 20 to 40 degrees Celsius. Simo's role in the war was to make the Russians understand, you don't fuck with Finland, and he put his point across. He had 705 confirmed kills on Russians in 100 days. That is more than any sniper ever. 542 of these with a rifle, and the remaining 150 or so were with his submachine gun. And he did all this without using the scope on his sniper rifle, because he didn't want to have to raise his head high enough over his cover to be able to see into a scope. And obviously you can keep a much lower profile if you just use an iron size. And of course, scopes, as we saw with the Carlos Hathcock story when he took out the rogue Viet Cong sniper, give away your position as soon as the sun reflects off them. The Russians desperately tried guessing his position and carpet bombing him. They actually got near him once, and some of the shrapnel tore up his white outfit, but didn't harm him whatsoever. They sent counter snipers, which Simo killed all of them up until 1940, when one of them got a lucky shot off and managed to hit Simo in the face with an exploding bullet. Now this blew off half of Simo's face, unfortunately, and put him into a coma. His comrades had to drag him out of the battle with what barely looked like a human, I think some of them described, after the terrible wound, as you can see from the picture. But miraculously, he woke up from the coma. A week later, it of course had ended his military service, but he lived until 2002. So there you go. Hollywood wasn't exaggerating at all with Rambo, the Terminator, or any of these guys. In fact, it was downplaying some of the things which have actually happened to real people. If you guys have got any more war stories, by the way, which you think I might have heard of, then if you can put them in the description, I always do make sure to read through the comments, and I might be able to make a future episode on them. But thanks for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed these tales, and I will see you in the next chapter.